Hey everybody, it's Atheist for the Cause here, and I wanted to do a special report on the Buzzfeed bullshit, so let's get into it.
Bombshell putting a legal focus on Trump's kids and the Trump organization they ran. Sources now saying that Trump directed Cohen to lie to Congress about the Moscow Trump Tower project. And it names Trump's kids, Ivanka and Donald Trump Jr., as having a big hand in the planning of that tower, receiving regular and detailed updates about the project from Cohen himself.
I just want to point out here, this has been going on more and more. I know Trump's kids are somewhat involved with Trump's campaign and all of that, so they are they have to be somewhat available for criticism, but in this sense, I think the criticism is pretty unwarranted. It seems like there's been a campaign to go after Trump's kids because they haven't been able to touch Trump or concern Trump. And so there's been some dirty politics going on. For a while now, I've reported on it in the past to go after Trump's kids. And it's pretty disgusting. But here in the BuzzFeed um, story, they're talking about how Trump allegedly directed his former lawyer Michael Cohen to lie to Congress about the Moscow Tower project. First of all, the Moscow Tower project, there's nothing wrong with that. Basically, Trump was trying to line up a deal to put a Trump Tower in Moscow in case, if he lost the presidential election, which back in the day was likely, he could have gone ahead forward with the project, but becoming president, he's obviously not going to go forward with it. And so, like, none of this is illegal, anyways. Now they're trying to say he lied, but when you say like there's an investigation into Trump based on a bunch of bullshit, and then he lied at some point, or tried to encourage somebody else to lie, and you're gonna get him on that. It's like a perjury trap. It's bullshit. And so even if Trump did do what they're saying, that's not something he should be impeached for. Um, so it really shows you how many hoops you have to jump through to say that Trump should be impeached for this. But as you're gonna see, you can't just grant them all of this because in the end, this entire story is bullshit. And I want to put some more perspective that people have forgot. There was a libel suit against Buzzfeed, and it got thrown out, and it had to do with the dossier and how you know BuzzFeed pushed this dossier by Christopher Steele, which turned out to be complete bullshit. And it turned out to be actually opposition research paid for by the Clinton campaign through a series of companies. And, then the FBI took this opposition research, brought it to the courts, a FISA court, where it's basically a secret court where they can spy on Americans, and the Americans will never know about it and listen in on phone calls or do other things. It's very extreme. You only want to do this in the rarest of circumstances where like national security is an issue because it really does infringe on an individual's rights, especially if they're an American citizen. So we need to, we can't draw a direct link from this lawsuit to any sort of revenge or any sort of them feeling like they can get away with more. But it does seem like this. I mean, this article about this lawsuit was published on December 19th of this year and updated on the 20th. That's pretty recent, just like a month ago. Um, so just keep all of that in perspective when we're talking about the bullshit BuzzFeed has been putting forward. So we already have the dossier bullshit, and now we have this.
Mueller learning about Trump's alleged directive to Cohen through interviews with multiple witnesses from the Trump organization, even internal company emails, text messages, and a cache of.
Keep this in mind. I'm showing you the original arguments right now. I mean, MSNBC is going back through it, but if you want to find the original Buzzfeed article, you can. But they're going through it fairly, and the BuzzFeed News did report that there were internal emails, text messages, a cache of other documents, things like that. I'm not going to go through it, but I did listen to multiple BuzzFeed reporters who worked on the story directly, and they said that first, one guy wouldn't say that he saw the documents, but he wouldn't say that he didn't see the documents. And the more he talked in an interview, the more it sounded like he didn't see the documents, but that he was sure they existed. How he was sure they existed despite not seeing the documents, who knows? But what should have raised red flags is that Trump doesn't really use emails very much or text messages. He doesn't like anything to be on paper. There's even reports of him having taken notes away from the translator when he talks to Putin and stuff, and people try to paint that as him trying to hide information, but really he just doesn't want any paper trail, because that can, you can give someone else paper, but if you just have a phone call, unless it's recorded, it's a lot harder to give that to someone. So Trump's pretty careful about what he uses, and he uses older technology. He doesn't really use text messages or emails as much. He probably does at a little bit, but this should be a red flag to any good reporter.
Other documents. As Ari pointed out, the Trump organization, it's not General Motors, it's not a huge company. It's basically a family-run organization. The executives are his kids, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and Eric Trump. That is the executive board you're seeing right there. And the lawyer was Michael Cohen, who is cooperating now. The CFO was given immunity from prosecutors, and that pretty much.
Look at these fuckers. Look at the pictures of the kids. This is probably the worst picture I've seen of Ivanka. She's obviously an attractive woman, and she's usually smiling. And here she's got a very serious look, like she's wasn't ready for a picture or something, and she doesn't look as good. These two, Eric and Donald Trump Jr., are also frowning and got some weird look on their face. And these are the pictures MSNBC chose to use. Now, this just shows you how biased they are. I mean, I know I don't have to convince you that MSNBC is biased against Trump, but this is how biased they even are against Trump's kids and how much they are willing to go after the kids. They're using terrible pictures, and whenever you see an outlet using terrible pictures, you know who they're going after.
Pretty much paints for you the picture of how this organization was run.
And the other 4 people who were inside the Trump organization at the time this felony was committed, who apparently would have had the authority within the company to make something like this happen.
By the way, Rachel Maddow is hilarious because she has a pretentiousness about her, like she's smarter than everybody. And granted, she is an intelligent person, but her cognitive dissonance is so ridiculous when it comes to Trump. And she speaks with such confidence that it's actually hilarious to listen to, because she's so incredibly wrong on so many things. And sometimes that's my opinion, but sometimes that becomes a provable, objective fact.
They happen to be 4 people who were employed as top executives at the Trump organization who all have the same last name.
All right, and just moments ago on this program, you saw Senator Richard Blumenthal tell me that Donald Trump Jr. should face criminal charges if, in fact, he lied to Congress. Joining me now once again, Glenn Kirshner, former federal prosecutor, and NBC's Ken Dilanian joins us live from Washington, D.C. Ken, let me begin with you. Let's talk a little bit about the very latest news and how it impacts the Trump family and the Trump organization.
Sure, Eamon. Well, look, it could be hugely significant. I just want to throw a little bit of a caution flag, though, which is that no news organization, including NBC News, has confirmed this story today. The New York.
When you have MSNBC putting out they are reporting on the story, and CNN approached this the same exact way. When these major media outlets are taking on the Buzzfeed story, but then approaching it with caution and saying it hasn't been corroborated yet, that should be a huge red flag. They want to expose Trump every way they can, but they've been burned by BuzzFeed before, especially with the dossier, and they know it.
York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, nobody. And this is a story that is based on the testimony of two law enforcement officials.
Keep in mind, there's allegedly documents, text messages, emails, and multiple anonymous sources that are all corroborating to come up with this information, this allegation that Trump allegedly told Michael Cohen to lie to the Senate. Now, this is all extremely ridiculous that none of the other media outlets would have gotten this information, and none of them can corroborate it. And just think about it. This should be another red flag if you're thinking about these issues at home. If you had some very serious allegations against the president, what outlet would you go to? I can tell you what outlet I wouldn't go to. Fucking BuzzFeed. Why the hell would you take the information to BuzzFeed?
Officials, and that would mark the first time that law enforcement officials with access to secret Mueller material have leaked something to the press, potentially in violation of the law. I'm not saying that I disbelieve the story. I'm saying that we should throw that out as a caution. And also the notion that the story...
Well, I mean, you kind of do disbelieve the story, right? If you're being skeptical of it. You're not saying the story is definitely wrong, but you don't believe it.
The story asks us to believe that people in the Trump organization are emailing and texting one another about an instruction from Donald Trump to Michael Cohen that he lie to Congress. To some people, that doesn't make a lot of common sense, that they would put that in writing. So those...
Exactly. I mean, he nailed it. I mean, this is coming from MSNBC. Pat on the back. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while.
Those are the caveats. Now, if this story is true, obviously, it's a game changer. You've been talking about it the whole hour. It's huge. It's potentially an impeachable offense. And it puts...
I better put a caveat to that. MSNBC isn't like some, holier-than-thou outlet. They ran and ran and ran with stories pushing this narrative that, basically that it really pushed the idea that it was likely to be true, that it hadn't necessarily been corroborated, but that this was like a huge story, and so they're not in it. MSNBC is far from innocent. Same thing with the other outlets like CNN.
It's new scrutiny on both Donald Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump because this story suggests, and Michael Cohen is suggesting, that he briefed them extensively on this secret Trump Tower Moscow deal that was unfolding during the presidential election. And Donald Trump Jr. told a very different story to Congress about this. He said he was only peripherally briefed on this, that he wasn't, significantly involved. And so if that ends up conflicting, if he told a lie to Congress, he's potentially on the hook. But we'll just have to see hugely whether this story is true. The other thing, Eamon, is there's growing pressure if the story is true. I've heard some members of Congress and even a former member of the intelligence community tell me Robert Mueller has an obligation to deliver this evidence immediately because Congress has been lied to and they have a right to act on it to start impeachment proceedings. Some people are wondering why Mueller would sit on this for months if, in fact, he's got evidence that the president committed a crime. Yeah.
Exactly. That is another huge point. He's actually doing a really good job exposing the flaws with the Buzzfeed stories, that if Robert Mueller had this information, then he would have had to like bring it out a while ago or whenever he knew about it to take Trump down, because this, you can't just like leave this hanging out there when you know you know you know that a witness has been tampered with and there's been obstruction of justice. So that Mueller would have tried to take Trump down right then and there.
Yeah, and that could perhaps be part of the motivation behind those who may have leaked that information. You brought up a very important caveat in all of this, which we should note. Glenn, let me get your thoughts on this particular.
You should more than just note it. That should be like the top of your list. Like, what is actually, what is a better point than that? I mean, that taints anything else that you hear.
Particular point in all of this, that is Donald Trump Jr. Telling the Senate back in 2017 that he is peripherally aware of the Moscow project. Obviously, the Buzzfeed.
Oh yeah, before they said it was a secret meeting, you know, with this Trump Tower stuff, but now they're saying back in 2016 or 2017 that he was peripherally aware of it. So like, this has been out for years. It's not like it wasn't that secret.
Report, if in fact true, would contradict this. You heard Senator Blumenthal say that means Trump Jr. should be criminally charged. That's a significant development.
I agree, Eamon. And I just heard Senator Blumenthal say the time is right to have Donald Trump Jr. come back before his committee, the Senate committee. And I think that makes perfect sense. And here's why. We now hear Donald Trump Jr. use a term like, well, I was on the periphery. That's one of those slippery, lawyer-esque terms that gives him a lot of wiggle room. Here's what I...
Well, it could also be true where he heard about it, but he wasn't on the inside of any of the negotiations, or maybe didn't even know any of the details.
I think makes a lot of sense. Invite him back to testify again or subpoena him and have him say one of three things. I stick with my periphery claim. No, I may have made a mistake and I may have known more about it, perhaps learning from Michael Cohen than I let on the first time, or he could plead the fifth if he thinks he has some criminal exposure for not being strict.
What would be the point of bringing him back? Like, he already put in his information. You know, it wouldn't make any sense for him to say, no, actually, I was wrong. I did know about it. That would just make him look bad. And if he already answered it, there'd be no reason for him to plead the fifth because he already answered it. So this is just a stupid idea. And time is very limited in Congress for this kind of thing. So if you brought in Junior, which, you know, he's a busy guy himself, and he agreed to go there, then, like, I don't even think you can subpoena him for what you already asked him about. So then, you know what, like, but bringing him back in would come at the cost of, like, talking to other people. Wouldn't it be better to talk to somebody else?
Straight with the Intel Committee the first time.
Let me get your thoughts very quickly on this point that Bob Mueller perhaps should come forward with this bit of information if, in fact, it's true. Separate from everything else that he is investigating, if he believes that Congress has been lied to, does he have an obligation to come out sooner than this report and at least just present that portion of this finding?
Having worked directly for Bob Mueller and learned in part how to be a federal prosecutor from Bob Mueller, I would not presume to tell Bob Mueller how to do his job. It does seem...
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not telling him how to do his job because this is a hypothetical, because all of this turned out to be bullshit. But obviously, if he had this information, he should be bringing it out because he has evidence of a crime.
Like there's a certain urgency involved. If the Mueller investigation has strong evidence that Michael Cohen lied to Congress, not about something minor, but about something like potential lies by the president, Russian collusion, conspiracy, subornation of perjury, that's something that I think we need to deal with now.
Yeah, it feels like this is a different threshold if, in fact, this report is true. Glenn Kirshner, appreciate your insights. Ken Delanian, always appreciate yours as well. Thanks, bud. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from...
All right, so that's that. And then here's the, evidence that, or at least the sign that the Buzzfeed article was indeed bullshit. Mueller's office disputes Buzzfeed report that Trump directed Michael Cohen to lie to Congress. And there's even been blue checkmark people that have come out and said, for those trying to parse what Mueller said, it was an emphatic denial. Mueller's office completely denies the Buzzfeed report. It was actually kind of funny because I was watching MSNBC. Unfortunately, I don't have a video clip of it because it was on cable news, and they haven't uploaded it to the internet yet as a clip. But the Jill Wine-Banks, who is one of those people that says everything is worse than Watergate. Carl Bernstein does the same thing because they were prosecutors or on the prosecution team in regards to Watergate. And she was talking about this story, and before the story, she mentioned how this was a big deal. After the Mueller's team came out, she was saying how we shouldn't throw the whole story out, even though Mueller denied it, and that this. She was saying beforehand this is the Watergate model, and it's oh my God, she couldn't. It's just pathetic that even after the BuzzFeed article was pretty much proven to be wrong, unless Mueller's speaking bullshit, she still couldn't admit that Trump should be looked at as innocent for this. Let's see what the video is.
We had intended to speak at the top of this program with one of two BuzzFeed reporters behind a report that, if true, meant that federal investigators had evidence.
She also said some funny things, she said that this was the most important link between Trump and Russia. So it's if this is the most important link and it's bullshit, then maybe there's not a very good link between Trump and being a Russian and Trump being a Russian actor.
Evidence that the President of the United States committed a serious crime and potentially an impeachable offense. CNN had not independently confirmed the story, nor had any other news organization. And just a few moments ago, we learned that BuzzFeed was going to pull their reporter from the program because Robert Mueller's office was about to weigh in. Well, that office has weighed in, and it is something in itself. Before getting into exactly what Mueller's office has now said, and they rarely ever...
So Anderson Cooper is talking about how Robert Mueller's office rarely ever weighs in, and that's the same thing the other girl said is why do they pick this article to weigh in on? Well, because this article does allege some of the most serious charges, and it's total bullshit, according to Mueller. I mean, if he knows it's bullshit, he has, I don't want to say he has an obligation, but the ethical thing to do would be no, this is bullshit. It also makes his team look bad because the leaks would likely come from his team. So he's protecting his team, saying, no, my guys didn't leak this. So there are good reasons for Mueller to actually say something here.
Ever say anything on the record. Here's the essence of what the BuzzFeed report was. The headline read, President Trump directed his attorney, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress about the Moscow Tower project. Earlier today, neither the president nor the White House categorically denied the substance of it. By this afternoon, though, that line had changed. Rudy Giuliani.
By the way, the president, the president's spokesman did say that the allegation was like completely bullshit. He didn't say it in those terms, but he said that the statement was ridiculous.
The president's TV lawyer calling the report categorically false. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders echoed that line.
Did the president direct Michael Cohen to lie to Congress?
Look, that's absolutely ridiculous. I think that the president's outside counsel addressed this best and said in a statement earlier today that's categorically false.
Well, now, in a very rare move, the special counsel's office has weighed in. CNN's Sarah Murray joins us now with that and all the other late developments. So, what did the special counsel's office say? And this just happened.
It did just happen, Anderson. And as you pointed out, it's remarkable that they issued a statement like this. But here's what it says from Peter.
It's remarkable in the sense that they don't do this often, which shows you how bullshit Buzzfeed's story was. You should never, ever trust anything Buzzfeed says ever again. If they're going to come out with such strong allegations and then emphatically defend it, saying how corroborated it all is, and then turns out these anonymous sources and, random documents, they aren't, giving specifics on emails and texts that seemingly would not exist, most likely. Turns out that the whole story is bullshit. Why would we ever give BuzzFeed credibility again? It's going to take a long time for them to repair their credibility with me, or their reputation with me.
Carr, the spokesman for the special counsel, BuzzFeed's description of specific statements to the special counsel's office and characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate.
Now, this is why President Trump calls the media fake news, because they put out bullshit like this, like BuzzFeed put out. And now CNN, MSNBC, a lot of the other major left-leaning outlets were actually pretty good this time, because the accusations were so ridiculous that even the Trump hating outlets were skeptical of it. But it just shows you how ridiculous BuzzFeed really has been.
And remember, Anderson, this story, it's sourced to, federal law enforcement officials, but it also said that there were all of these documents, that there were interviews, that there were witnesses, and that is really what backed up this notion that the president had tried to get Michael Cohen to testify to something that just wasn't true in front of Congress. And now the special counsel is pretty unequivocally saying, we have documents and witness statements, but they don't back up what BuzzFeed is saying in the story.
Okay, so at what point should this be illegal? I know, the media has extra protections, and maybe what they're doing isn't illegal, but at what point should this be illegal? I want the media to be able to do their job, but when they put out extremely false information that basically everybody was skeptical of from the beginning, and then it turns out to be completely false, to the point that a special counsel declared it false, even though they never say anything. Shouldn't there be some legal consequence for the slander that actually hurts people? Think about if it wasn't Trump, if it was just some random person. And this happens all the time with people who are falsely accused of rape and things like that. Those people get ruined, and they don't have the power to fight back.
BuzzFeed, by the way, just responded. I'm quoting from them. We are continuing to report and determine what the special counsel is disputing. We remain confident in the accuracy of our report, they say.
How? They remain confident in the accuracy of their report. So BuzzFeed News is trying to argue that Robert Mueller is wrong. Sorry, on this, I'll take Robert Mueller's side. Now, for those of you who want to party and think that this means Robert Mueller doesn't have anything on Trump, I don't think he's going to have anything like legal on Trump. He'll probably have some sort of dirt, but uh, it makes sense for Mueller to clean this up, not only in a sense he's protecting his team, but anything he does release, uh, he doesn't want to be tainted by this false report. He doesn't want them to be conflated. So I wouldn't party yet. Let's just wait and see what happens with the Mueller report, which is probably going to come out soon, and and we can just judge it as it comes out. We don't have to try to get ahead of the report and then like make false statements and then look terrible. I mean, we want to know the truth. If Trump really was a Russian agent, it'd be best to find that out. I hope he isn't. I don't think he is, but let's wait and see. Um, and then, you know, I guess that's all I really have to say. The only other thing I want to add is when Trump says the media is the enemy of the people, this is what he's talking about, this like what Buzzfeed just did. That is fake news. And when the media is putting out fake news, um, that works a lot like state-run propaganda. When when they're liberal, when they're biased, and the liberals have their bias with CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, those outlets. Conservatives have Fox News mainly on cable, maybe C-SPAN you could consider, Fox Business, uh, One American News, those kind of outlets. Um, and then they have like the Drudge Report and stuff like that. When it's this incredibly biased, it really does harm the public, and it does become the enemy of the public. Now, when Trump's in office, the right-leaning media is going to seem reasonable because they don't have to lie. But when a Democrat comes into office, like when Obama was in office, CNNs and MSNBCs of the world, they were a lot more reasonable. It was the Fox Newses of the world that were batshit insane. This goes back and forth depending on what party is mostly in office, and largely determined by the president. So I'm really worried about people overcompensating, you know, and people moving further and further and further right when, we've beat the progressives down, and, the progressives were too far left, but we don't want we don't want to go too far to the right and then like be relying too much on the Fox Newses of the world, and then only to find out in a couple of years Fox News is as bad as anybody. So um, the left isn't wrong when they say Fox News is as bad as anybody. So they just don't see how bad CNN and MSNBC and those guys are, because those are the outlets that agree with them. So let's not pull the same mistake. So I guess I'll talk to you guys later, but it's just funny that this whole thing with BuzzFeed, the whole story got destroyed in like less than 24 hours. Just so ridiculous. Have a good one, guys.